For a country often called the North Korea of Africa, Eritrea has a strange and unique charm. It feels like stepping into a Wes Anderson movie. Bicycles weave through the streets, men wear tailored suits, colorful flowers line the sidewalks, and old-world cafes seem to belong to another era. There's no McDonald's, no Starbucks, no KFC, just a nation frozen in time, where glamorous colonial buildings decay with a quiet elegance. We touched down at Asmara's small airport, where the makeshift wall separates baggage claim from immigration. Despite no crowds, the visa process still took over 2 hours to complete. That delay shows Eritrea's tight grip. Decades under President Isaias Afwerki's absolute rule keep it one of the most isolated places anywhere, needing a tour operator for an entry visa and permits to leave the capital. Finally free to explore, we hit the hotel desk and exchanged dollars for the local currency, the Nakfa. The name comes from the town of Nakfa, where the Eritrean War of Independence saw its first major victory. It's pegged to the US dollar at a fixed rate, 15 Nakfa to 1. Then, we set off for a city tour of Asmara, Eritrea's capital. Our first stop was the Medebar Market, a sprawling metal recycling yard. Here, every scrap of metal, really any scrap, gets stripped down and remade. The work here is some of the toughest you can imagine, scorching heat, heavy lifting, and constant fumes and open flames, all with almost no safety rules in place. As we walked through, sparks shot out from narrow alleys lined with rusty aluminum sheets, and the steady clang of hammers filled the air. The ground was a mix of discarded metal beads stained red with rust. Old bed frames were being taken apart and reshaped into new ones, while tire rims sat waiting to be melted down. Chairs, wheelchairs, even charcoal stoves for brewing coffee were sanded smooth and given new life. Nothing gets missed, even toilet bowls find a second chance here. Like many places across Africa, people here are highly pious. Eritrea is split pretty evenly between Christians and Muslims, and these communities live side by side peacefully, with churches and mosques just steps apart. Our next stop was the Enda Mariam Church, Asmara's main church. Built in 1937, it mixes Italian and Eritrean styles. The entrance has this striking colourful artwork painted by an Italian artist. We arrived to a curious scene. Outside the church, devotees gathered on the field next to it, some standing, others kneeling, hands clasped in prayer. Our guide told us the inside is full. If you don't get a spot, you pray outside facing the image of Saint Mary. At busy times, the whole compound fills up with worshippers. In the courtyard, there are 4 blessed rocks. Dating back to the 17th century, they are said to be blessed because each one makes a different musical note when you strike it. From here, we spotted the minaret of the Khulafa Rashidun Mosque, also called the Great Mosque of Asmara. Built around the same time as the church, it blends Italian and Islamic designs. Now, the Italian theme is no coincidence. Eritrea fell under the Italian rule in 1890, and Italy left its mark until the British took over in 1941. Eritrea gained independence in 1993, but Italy's influence is still all over the place. They call it Italy in Africa for a reason. You see it in the architecture and even the food. Olive oil on tables, espresso everywhere, and pasta on almost every menu. Maybe it's just our ignorance, but we couldn't help noticing how clean Asmara streets are. Compared to some other African countries we've visited, there's a real pride here in keeping the city spotless. The palm trees lining the roads also give it this California Boulevard feel. After walking through the old fresh food market, we arrived at Gibabo Restaurant and Pizzeria, said to be Asmara's top spot. They serve traditional Eritrean dishes like zigni and tipsi, alongside pizzas and pastas with spicy Eritrean sauces. The flavors caught us off guard, bold, rich, and spiced to perfection. If you're in Eritrea, you've got to try injera. It's a spongy sour flatbread made from teff grain, usually topped with zigni or chickpea stew, and you eat it with your hands. Our friend Jimmy also found a little wine bar tucked inside this restaurant. It's beautifully done up with an old-world charm, almost like stepping back in time. Though it was closed, the bartender said it fills up at night. Eritreans have a history they hold dear. A nation of only 30 years old, their independence story is like David versus Goliath. Ethiopia battled for 30 years to keep Eritrea under its thumb, backed by the US at first and the Soviets later, but with few resources, the Eritreans still came out on top. The massive tank graveyard is proof of that struggle. When we got there, we saw heaps of Soviet and American tanks, German buses, trucks, and armored cars scattered among cacti and wildflowers, all left over from that 30-year war. Ethiopia had the upper hand, yet they lost. But Eritrea's story is not without irony. After 30 years fighting for freedom, the country spent another 2 decades under a dictatorship. Still, despite the struggles, Eritreans take pride in their independence and their strength to push through. The tank graveyard stands as a reminder of that past and a sign of people who've beaten tough odds before and may yet shape their own future. The rest of our day was spent heading towards the coast. The drive down was winding and foggy, turning what should have been 2 hours into almost 4. Finally, we reached Massawa, a port city. We stayed the night at the Dalak Grand Hotel, an old seaside place that's clearly seen better days. The next morning, after a slow breakfast by the sea, we picked up snacks, water and beers from a nearby minimart, getting ready for the Dalak Archipelago, one of the least visited island groups left on Earth. Set in the Red Sea, this remote cluster can only be reached by boat from Massawa. You need permits to go, and the cost keeps most travelers away. Traveling as a group made it affordable, and after a bit of a bumpy start, we headed out across the water toward one of the islands. Then, after 2 hours staring at the wide, empty sea, Dise Island came into view. We were greeted by a nearly untouched beach with crystal clear waters and some curious wildlife wandering around. There are no buildings or toilets here, but our guides did what they could to make it comfortable. With no restaurants anywhere, they brought along a cook to prepare our meals right on the island. Fish pulled fresh from the sea was cooked right in front of us. Maybe we were just starving, but that meal was delicious. We heard there were some locals living here, but we saw no one else. There were some huts and homes further inland, though they look abandoned for years. We spotted signs of a resort that was built and left behind, probably because hardly any tourists make it out this way. The next day, after another breakfast of fish, we took a boat to Madote Island, a barren sandbar just 40 minutes away. It was so isolated that a colony of birds had nested there. They took off in a rush when we showed up. Walking around the small sandbar felt unreal, with its endless mosaic of corals, shells, and even more corals covering the ground. Back in Massawa, we explored the old town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It blends Ottoman, Egyptian, and Italian colonial architecture, shaped by centuries of trade through its Red Sea port. Sadly, because of the conflicts with Ethiopia, many of these buildings, like the old Bend of Italia, were bombed and now sit in ruins. Walking through it all felt heavy, though there was still a quiet beauty to it. Massawa also carries the memory of Operation Thank You, the second battle of Massawa, fought in 1990 during the war with Ethiopia. Our guide explained how the Eritreans here had just 3 tanks against Ethiopia's 27, yet somehow they won. Another David and Goliath story. You can see the 3 tanks at the Memorial Plaza for the battle's victims. Our day wrapped up with a drive back to Asmara. Clouds filled the sky and the sunset lit up the landscape. Our last day in Eritrea was closing in and we weren't ready to go. There's so much beauty, so much history here, and we only scratched the surface. Day 4 in Asmara started with a cappuccino. Honestly, we ended up drinking a ton of coffee on this trip. Thanks to Eritrea's Italian past, you'll find vintage Italian machines pumping out cappuccinos, macchiatos, and espressos in cafes all over the city, even down in Massawa. Then there's the bun, the traditional coffee ceremony. Beans are roasted fresh, ground, and brewed in a clay jabina pot. It's then served in small cups with a hint of ginger, alongside popcorn or himbasha, a sweet bread. Drinking coffee here is a social thing. Locals gather, sip, and chat together. For a country said to have the worst internet around, the people we met were surprisingly clued into the world, talking to us about politics, education, even asking about Singapore's infamous chewing gum ban. We noticed BBC and Al Jazeera on TVs, and their newspapers, just a few pages long, cover both global and local news. Our guide took us next to the cave in Himberti, a village near Asmara. It's known locally for rock carvings believed to date back to 400 BC. There are sketches of animals like cows and what could be a family tree. The locals prefer it stays off the tourist radar, so it's kept a low profile. Back in Asmara, we treated ourselves to gelato, another Italian touch, at Da Fortuna Gelato Italiano, said to be the best spot in town. They had all sorts of flavors, but the pistachio really stood out. We stopped by the Enda covered market to pick up handmade souvenirs, from fridge magnets to hand-painted artwork. Eritrea is often called the North Korea of Africa, but unlike North Korea, we could roam the city freely. We only need permits for travels to certain areas. For instance, our trip to the city of Keren didn't happen because our permits were denied. Still, in Asmara, we could wander without a guide watching our every step. That said, citizens here face real restrictions like mandatory indefinite conscription, which resulted in many young people leaving the country. The spotty internet, or lack of it, is both a boon and a bane. On one hand, people aren't glued to their phones. Families and friends actually talk face to face, and internet addiction isn't a thing here. But while internet cafes are easy to find in the capital, a friend in our group met a local in Massawa who said he drives 20 minutes just to check his emails. So is it a good thing or the bad thing? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. After shopping, we took a tour of Asmara's Art Deco architecture, which earned it UNESCO World Heritage status. The Fiat Tagliero service station, with its futuristic 30-meter plane wings, steals the show. Some of us climbed to the roof and walked the wings, overly confident that this old relic could handle the extra weight. After some shenanigans, we visited Cinema Roma, a well-preserved theatre from 1937. Once a spot for Asmara's elite, it is now a local hangout for coffee and films. With our trip winding down, we took a taxi to the famous bowling center of Asmara. One of the few original bowling alleys left from the 1950s. It's a real gem. Teens played FIFA nearby, while adults shot pool. The bowling lanes were empty, so for 100 nakfa each, my wife and I bowled on slanted lanes with rough, odd-shaped balls. Scores are still tallied by hands, and kids manually reset the pins. I'll let you guess who won. Honestly, we didn't expect to fall in love with Eritrea. From the stunning architecture and slower pace of life to the incredible food, it kept surprising us. The media paints a grim picture of isolation and control, but here, in the warmth of daily life, we found a spirit that defies the gloom. Eritrea hums with its own rhythm, a place that left us enchanted and hopeful for its future.